In the previous episode, Ryan did a noble deed, helping a poor widow get her house back. His kindness and compassion were revealed to us from a new side. But the past does not let go. Ryan learns about a secret meeting of the management of the Knight Petroleum Corporation. What are these people hiding? And how is this connected with his personal tragedy? If you are visiting this channel for the first time, be sure to subscribe so as not to miss this and new chapters of this wonderful story. The link in the description contains a playlist with all the chapters of this story that have already been released. In this part of the story, we are waiting for shocking revelations, dangerous adventures, and unexpected plot twists. Will Ryan be able to avenge his family and restore justice? We will find out very soon. The most important thing is hope. Chapter 5. What do you mean you lost everything? He asked the crying woman in the front seat. The house, the car, all the furniture, everything. She wailed through her tears. Even my chickens. She sobbed even harder, her face turning beet red. My defenseless chickens. They'll die if I'm not around to feed them. He knew she kept chickens and sold eggs to families in town to supplement what she received from her husband's welfare, and he knew they meant a lot to her. How did this happen? He asked. Someone came and took your property? The sheriff came out this morning and said if I didn't have the money I owed the bank, I had to leave, she said, sobbing. So, where were you going? He asked. Down to the creek, she said. I have nowhere else to go, so I thought everything would be better if I just went there and died, she said. That triggered another bout of tears. Saddened by her plight, he hugged her for a few minutes. Why didn't you say anything? He asked. I don't want to be a burden, she said. My poor Wallace would be so ashamed of me if he found out. He knew that Wallace was her late husband. He had never met him, but had heard good things about him from acquaintances in town. It's not onerous, he said. How much do you owe? Too much, she said. About $170,000. I consolidated all my bills through the bank and did everything I could to make ends meet. I even stopped eating out every day to save money, but it's not enough. Every time I think things are going to get better, it turns to shit. I'd rather be dead. Nonsense, Ryan said. Where do you make bank? The First National Bank in town, she said. There's nothing you can do. All they want is their money. I work there too, Ryan said. I'll call you now. He pulled out his wallet and found the business card he was looking for, then grabbed his phone. First National Bank, the receptionist said as she picked up the phone. I'd like to speak to J. Goldsmith, please, Ryan said. I'll see now if Mr. Goldsmith is free, said the secretary. May I know who is calling? Tell him it's Ryan Caldwell, and if he wants to keep my business, he'll be free, Ryan said. Oh, yes, sir, Mr. Caldwell. One moment, please, she said. A few seconds later, Jay was on the phone. Mr. Caldwell, he said excitedly. It's good to hear from you, sir. What can I do for you today? You can tell me what's going on with Beverly Simons, Ryan said. I'm sorry, Mr. Caldwell. Confidentiality rules prohibit me from divulging such information, he said. You'll be much more upset when I take my account out of your bank, Ryan said. I'm sorry, Mr. Caldwell, but those are the rules and I have to follow them, Jay said. Besides, why are you involved in this? She's sitting in my truck right now, crying and saying she's going to kill herself because you made the sheriff come and evict her from her home, Ryan said. Tell me, Mr. Goldsmith, what kind of piece of shit kicks a widow out of her own home, where she has nothing but her clothes, just because she's down on her luck? Mr. Caldwell, please understand, Jay began. I don't like this any more than you do. We did everything we could to help her, but it's been coming to this for a long time. My hands are tied. Her account has to be cleared. So if her bill is paid, you'll give her the house back? Asked Ryan. Well, yes, Jay said. But there are other problems. It has a very high debt-to-income ratio. I'm afraid that's going to happen again in the future. Leave it to me to worry about that, Jay, Ryan said. Tell you what, I'll come into town, and we'll get this sorted out. Get her paperwork ready, and make sure that piece of shit sheriff is there to give her the keys back. What's the deadline? Well, 5 o'clock today is closing time, Jay said. Ryan looked at his watch. It's 11:30, Ryan said. I'm turning around and I'll be there in a little while. And you better be there. Got it?" "Yes, sir, Mr. Caldwell," Jay said. "I'll be here, and thank you, Mr. Caldwell, from the bottom of my heart." "You're welcome," Ryan said. He ended the conversation and looked at Beverly. Her eyes were wide and she looked shocked. "Come on, Miss Simons, let's go get your house back." She smiled widely and put her arms around his neck. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell," she said. "That's the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me." "My pleasure," he said. "And please, call me Ryan. Mr. Caldwell was my father." She laughed for the first time in a long time. "Please call me Beverly. Or Bev. That's what all my friends call me," she said, wiping tears from her eyes. Ryan turned his truck around, scattering gravel, and headed back into town. "So, Bev," he said, "what happened, if you don't mind me asking?" "The last few years have not been easy for us," she said. "Wallace was a hard worker and always took care of business, but he started having health problems. He got diabetes, but he wouldn't adjust his diet like the doctor said. I tried to get him to eat right, but he wouldn't listen. It got to the point where he had to have his legs amputated. After that, he started having kidney problems and had to go on dialysis. He could not take care of the crops, so he sold the fields and equipment. It helped a little bit, but then he started having other health problems. It was one thing after another, one thing after another. We took out a home loan to pay for everything. He went on welfare, and about 7 or 8 months later, he had a major heart attack. He never made it out alive, he says. It took almost everything we had to pay for his final expenses and funeral, she says. I was getting part of his Social Security and selling eggs to make ends meet. It wasn't easy, but I managed. I still had to pay the mortgage and everything else, and my monthly expenses took almost everything that came in. And then came the damn coronavirus. Half the town was out of work and my egg sales were almost at a standstill. Jay did what he could, loan and all, but it wasn't enough. Then my car broke down and I had to fix it. That took almost a month's income. And now this. You said your husband was receiving Social Security? Asked Ryan. He must have been about 25 years older than you? Yes, she said. I've known him all my life. He was a friend of my parents. They died in a car accident, and he took me in. They lived in poverty all their lives. They had nothing. They didn't even have the trailer we lived in. Wallace let me stay with him after they died. I didn't want to be a freeloader, so I helped him on the farm. I cooked, took care of the house and all the animals while he tilled the fields. He offered to send me to school, but I refused. Why? Asked Ryan. All I wanted was to be a wife and mother, she says. I don't need a college education to do that. I guess not, Ryan said. Basically, Wallace and I fell in love with each other, she says. I'd always had a bit of a crush on him, so it was pretty easy for me. We got married, we had a boy, and I thought we'd be together forever. And then he died. I've heard a lot of good things about him, Ryan said. He was a good man, she said. He worked hard, helped neighbors when they needed it, took good care of me and our boy Jason. He never drank, was never abusive, and was always there for us. Sounds like you two were very happy, he said. We were, she said. We were madly in love with each other. She began to cry again. Now I've lost everything we worked so hard for. You haven't lost it yet, Ryan said. We're here, he added, pulling into the bank parking lot. Might want to clean up a little, he said, holding out a clean handkerchief to her. She wiped her face and checked her makeup in the mirror on the visor on the passenger side. Are you ready? He asked. She looked at him and nodded her head. Okay, he said, smiling. Let's do this. She giggled and got out of the car. They walked into the bank, and Ryan headed straight for the elevator. They entered the elevator, and Ryan pressed the button for the 4th floor where Jay's office was located. An attractive receptionist greeted them as they exited the elevator. Mr. Goldsmith is expecting you, Mr. Caldwell, she said. Please come in. Beverly looked at Ryan and wondered who this man was and how he had managed to be so honored. She knew nothing about the man who had bought the old Winters house and thought he was just a lonely vagrant living in this old, dilapidated house. In an old tattered hat, jeans, and a simple Western shirt, he certainly didn't look like anything special. What happened to his face? She asked herself. Thank you, Ryan said, and walked over to the double doors. When he opened the door, he gestured for Beverly to go in first, and closed the door behind him. Jay stood up from the table and held out his hand. Ryan shook it and nodded to Sheriff Coltrane, who stood up to shake his hand. "Let's get this over with, okay?" asked Ryan. Jay nodded his head. "How much in total does Miss Simons owe?" Jay wrote a number on a piece of paper and held it out to him. $175,253.84. Ryan looked at Jay. "And if it's all paid for, you'll give her everything back?" he asked. "Yeah," Jay said. "But like I said," he started before Ryan interrupted him. "Yeah, I know," Ryan said. "The ratio of income to debts. But if her debts are paid off, that shouldn't be a problem, should it? I'm told that's the total amount she owes for everything." "That's true," Jay said. "But she still has to factor in monthly expenses, bills, utilities, gas, food, and so on. What she's getting now barely covers those expenses." "Okay," Ryan said. "Let me worry about that. What do we need to do?" Jay put the card reader on his desk. "Just insert your debit card and enter the code," he said. After Ryan had done that, he continued. "Now, enter the amount you want to transfer," Jay added. Ryan did a quick calculation in his mind and entered $1,750,000,084. It was just under 1% of the amount he had deposited in Jay's bank, but he thought Beverly deserved a break. "Are you absolutely sure about that?" asked Jay, eyes wide. "Absolutely," Ryan said. "That should allay any concerns about the revenue-to-debt ratio, don't you think? Even with the taxes she'll have to pay, that should be enough to last her for a long time." "Yes, it will," Jay said. He turned to Beverly. "Miss Simons, could you please insert your card into the ATM so we can wrap this up?" Beverly nodded her head, pulled out her card, and inserted it into the reader. While they watched, Jay pressed a few buttons on his computer and watched. "The transfer has already been made," he said. "Let me make another transfer. Wait." They watched him type something into the computer. He pressed enter and watched for a few more moments. Then he pressed a button on his phone, and a receptionist answered him. "Yes?" replied the secretary. "Mrs. Barber, will you please come to my office?" he asked. "And bring the notary's seal with you, if you please." "Right away, sir," she said. A few minutes later, she entered the office. Jay looked at Sheriff Coltrane. "Sheriff, would you witness my signature on this?" he asked. "I'd be honored," the sheriff said, standing up. They signed all the papers, and Mrs. Barber notarized them when they were done. She made copies and returned them to Jay, who handed a copy of the papers to Beverly. "Miss Simons, here are the documents confirming that all of your debts to this bank have been paid in full," he said. "In the next few days, you will receive a certificate of title for your real estate and the title to your car." He turned to the sheriff and held out another packet of papers to him. "Sheriff, would you be so kind as to take this to the courthouse and get it processed, and immediately?" "My pleasure," the large man said, taking the papers. "While I'm here, I'll have the paper put the ad down. I don't want people to get the wrong impression." "Do it," Jay said. The local paper usually advertised legal matters such as foreclosures, divorces, and auctions. Sheriff Coltrane stood in front of Jake with papers in his hands. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, "I want you to know that what I did before broke my heart. I take no pleasure in it. Please accept my apologies." "Copy that," Ryan said, "but I think she's the one you need to apologize to." "You're right," the sheriff said. He thought about Ryan for a moment before continuing. "I don't know if you attend church or not, Mr. Caldwell, but I have a feeling it was God's will for the two of you to meet there the way you did." He glanced at Beverly before continuing. "You do know he's single, as you are, don't you, Miss Simons?" She shook her head. "I didn't know," she said. Sheriff Coltrane smiled, nodding his head. He pulled a bunch of keys out of his pocket and held them out to her. "I'll call a deputy sheriff over to you and he'll remove all the locks," he said. "Now you're going to take good care of this man, you hear?" She smiled, taking the keys. "Thank you, Sheriff," she said. "You bet." He turned to Ryan again. "That was the most horrible thing I've ever seen," he told Ryan. "You're a good man, Mr. Caldwell, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart." "I'm grateful to the sheriff," Ryan said. Let me know if I can help you with anything, okay? The sheriff said. There's one thing, Ryan said. What's that? Asked Sheriff Coltrane. No publicity, Ryan said. I know how something like this can spread in a small town, and I don't want any publicity. You got it, the sheriff said. You have a good day, you hear? He asked, touching his gray Stetson before walking away. Here's your new balance sheet, Miss Simons, Jay said, holding out a small piece of paper to Beverly. Her eyes widened as she looked at the balance sheet. She turned to Ryan. I can't accept all this, she said. I can never repay you. Ryan smiled. Don't even think about it, Ryan said. And yes, you can accept it. He turned to Jay. I hope you'll have one of your financial advisors work out a budget with her and manage it so that it's enough for her to last. I'll take care of it myself, Jay said. Just curious, why did you do it? I don't mind helping someone who is honestly trying, Ryan said. Besides, I know what it's like to lose everything that means anything to you. A wise old man gave me a second chance once, and I decided to return the favor. I understand, Jay said. He turned to Beverly. Call me this week and we'll make an appointment, okay, Miss Simons? He asked. She nodded her head. I will, she said. Thank you very much. They said their goodbyes and walked out of the bank. Beverly was stunned by Ryan's act and wondered what he wanted in return. He opened the door of his truck and helped her inside, then got behind the wheel. When was the last time you had a proper meal? He asked. It's been quite a while, she said. Why? I don't know about you, but I'd eat something, he said. Why don't you let me buy you a nice lunch? Are you sure? She asked. After everything you've already done? It's only lunch, he said. Besides, it'll take the deputy a while to get to your house. Okay, she said. It's just been a long time since I've been asked out by a handsome man. Maybe we should get your eyes checked while we're here, Ryan said, pointing to his scar. Beverly smiled. Call it a woman's intuition, she said. But I suspect there's a kind, handsome man lurking beneath that rough exterior. Ryan chuckled, starting the truck. They pulled out of the bank and stopped at a steakhouse on Main Street. They went inside and were escorted to a booth in the back. It's my first time here, she said. It looks expensive. I've eaten here a couple times, he said. They make a great tenderloin. You should try it. Maybe I will, she said. It's been a long time since I've had steak. They placed their order and waited for their food to arrive. So, Beverly said, I've told you my story. What do you have to say? What did you mean by saying you know what it's like to lose everything? I was married once too, he said. A long time ago. Thought I had a good life. And then it all went down the toilet. What did you do? She asked. I was a mechanic, he said. ASE certified master mechanic. Dreamed of one day opening my own store. Mechanic? She asked. Do you still work with cars? Not for long, he said. What happened, if you don't mind me asking? She said. I don't mind, he said. I was married for about 17 years to my high school sweetheart. Had a good job, a nice house, a family. One day, my wife came home and announced she was divorcing me. Said she didn't want to be married to a grease monkey who wasn't going anywhere. Looks like she found a better place for herself with a rich oil tycoon. Oh my God, Beverly said. That must have been awful. It was, he said. And to top it off, my daughter announced she was going with my wife. I'm sorry, she said. Not your fault, he said. They both died to me that day. So did my dreams. It must have hurt a lot, she said. I can't even imagine what it feels like. Of course you can, Ryan said. I felt about the same as you did when I picked you up this morning. But you still have the house, right? She asked. You still had a job and a dream of opening your own store. Without Lisa and Sarah, none of this meant anything anymore, he said. So what did you do? She asked. Cried in the beer hall. Even considered ending my life a couple times, he says. I did something once, but I couldn't pull the trigger. Oh my God, she said. I ran into an old friend of mine at a bar one night after my divorce, Ryan says. He offered me a job, and I accepted. For the next 9 years, I traveled extensively out of the country. What were you doing? She asked. Where did you go? I was what you might call a private security consultant, he said. Wherever there were bad guys with good guy entanglements who were just trying to make an honest living, that's where I went. Africa, South and Central America, the Middle East. Call it what you want. So you were kind of an equalizer, she said. I never thought of it that way, he said. But yeah, you could say I did. And I take it you were paid good money for it, she said. Yeah, he said. A lot more than I ever made as a mechanic. And I had a friend who helped me make even more money. Is that how it happened? She asked, pointing to the patch over her eye and the scar on Ryan's face. He nodded his head. Yes, he said. That was my last job. The sheik I was working for made it so I could step away from the business. Is this the wise old man you were talking about earlier? She asked. He did, Ryan said. He suggested I go somewhere quiet and find peace. So you came here, she said. Ryan nodded his head. Yes, he said. And this place has been home to me ever since. I always wondered why anyone would want to buy that old dilapidated house, she says. I remember playing with the kids who lived there a long time ago. Even then, the house was pretty run down. So, what do you do now? Right now I'm just dealing with family issues, he said. I thought you said your family was dead to you, she said. It was, Ryan said. Turns out my daughter married some analyst who somehow managed to track me down. She had a rare blood disorder and needed a bone marrow transplant, so I helped her. And, of course, I ran into her mother. Let me guess, Beverly said. They want you and your ex-wife to become friends or something, right? Ryan chuckled. Something like that, he said. Really? She asked. What, make up with her? He asked. He shook his head. No, he finally said. It's a little complicated. No, Ryan, she didn't, she said. She ripped your heart out with her betrayal. I can understand you wanting to help your daughter. She's your flesh and blood. But I can never imagine being friends with someone who destroyed you like that. You're very wise, Beverly Simons, he said. Besides, I just found out something about my ex. Oh? She asked. I just got back to see my family, he said. She was shot. I'm sorry to hear that, she said. Do they know who did it? We know, he said. We also have an idea of the causes. Wait a minute, she said. I saw on the news that a female executive of an oil company was attacked. Was it her? Yes, it is, he said. Wow, she said. So what happens now? I don't know, he said. If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know, she said. He smiled. I don't know how you can help, but thanks anyway, he said. They finished their meal and headed for the exit. I don't want to impose after all you've already done, she said. But do you mind if we stop by the Piggly Wiggly? I need to pick up a few things. Not at all, he said. I need to get something. They stopped outside the store and he went with her, pushing the cart as she filled it with groceries. Her eyes popped out when she saw that he'd picked up a package of hot dogs and some TV dinners. Do you eat these things? She asked. Yeah, why? He asked. You better eat the cardboard this shit comes in, she said. I heard, he said. They paid for the food and Ryan loaded it into the truck. They got in the car and hit the road. When they pulled up to her house, the gate was unlocked and open. He pulled into the driveway and parked in front of her 2-story house and then helped her carry everything into the house. Well, I'd better go home, he said. She stopped him at the door and hugged him, then kissed him on the cheek. Thank you for everything, she said. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't picked me up. He smiled, looking into her beautiful face. My pleasure, he said. If you need anything else, please let me know. I will, thank you, she said. Is it okay if I check in on you from time to time? Anytime, he said. Let me give you my number. He wrote his cell phone number on the piece of paper she gave him and handed it back to her. I haven't asked a woman out in a while, but maybe we can go to a movie or something if that's okay with you. I'll be more than satisfied, she said with a smile. He walked out of her house feeling like a teenager who had just had his first date. When he got home, he put away the few groceries he had and took his duffel bag upstairs. His cell phone buzzed, and he pulled it out of his pocket, noticing it was Sarah. That's when he realized he'd forgotten to call when the plane landed. He picked up the phone. Hi, he said. Thank God you're all right, Sarah said. I was so worried. What happened? Oh, I met the widow on my way home and helped her a little, he said. I'm sorry I haven't called. I just got home. Any news? No, not really, she said. We were just worried that something had happened to you. I just had lunch with an attractive widow and then took her to the store, Ryan said. Are you telling me you actually took a woman out to dinner? She asked. What about all that talk about not having another relationship and living like a miserable hermit for the rest of your life? Maybe I brought it up too soon, he said. You'll have to tell me about this attractive widow someday, she said. I probably will, he said. Are the FBI guys still with you? Yes, she said. Gillespie plays cops and robbers with little Ryan, if you can believe it. Now that's something I'd like to see, Ryan said. Listen, guys, be very careful, you hear me? I will, Daddy, she said. Anyway, I have to go make dinner. I'll call you if I hear anything. Do it, Ryan said. The call ended. Ryan went downstairs and made a fresh pitcher of sweet tea, then went out on the porch. He sat down in the rocking chair, lit a cigarette, and pulled out Lisa's cell phone. The first thing he did was check to see if there was a tracking program on it, like Greg had shown him before. He didn't find anything, but he turned off the GPS anyway, just in case. He didn't think anyone would be following her since she was in a coma, but he figured it was better to be safe than sorry. He spent the next couple hours going through her emails and messages, trying to find anything that would let him know what was going on. They were mostly dry, business-like messages that meant little to him. There were emails about audits and profit and loss statements, a few emails about minimizing the damage from Jake's upcoming trial, but nothing that would help him in any meaningful way. Then he stumbled across an email that mentioned a retreat. I bet you can't wait for the retreat this year, Elmer wrote. He skimmed the thread and read her reply. This will be the first retreat I've participated in without Jake, she said. I can't wait to get out of town for a while to recuperate. Ryan thought about that exchange and remembered Elmer telling him about the retreat. What had he said there? He thought hard and remembered Elmer telling him about Lisa going crazy on their annual summer retreats. He figured out how to do a search on her email and ran it using the word retreat. He watched the app search for the keyword and the arrow kept spinning. Putting his phone away, he pulled out his own and dialed Jorge's number. Hey Ryan, Jorge said when the man answered. I see you made it home. Yeah, that's right, Ryan said. Look, I need you to try and find something for me. What's that? Asked Jorge. Looks like Knight's management is holding their annual retreat somewhere out of town, Ryan said. Could you do a little digging and find out where that might be? I'm guessing they own some rural estate where they won't be peeked at by nosy neighbors. I'll do some searches and see what I can find, he said. It's going to take me a while. No problem, Ryan said. Let me know as soon as you find something. They finished talking, and Ryan had another idea. He called Bob's cell phone. His brother-in-law answered on the first ring. What's up, Ryan? He asked. Tell me something, Bob, Ryan said. I'm interested to know how you found me here. Well, it took some work, Bob said. He went on to talk about county records, macros, and spreadsheet downloads, causing Ryan to lower his eyes. You ended up finding me by digging through the county's tax and property records, right? Asked Ryan. Yeah, you could say that, Bob said. Why? Do you think you could do the same thing, only this time look for properties owned by Jacob Knight or Knight Petroleum? Asked Ryan. Yeah, I don't see why not, Bob said. The macros are already programmed, you just have to change the search parameters. How long do you think it might take? Asked Ryan. I don't know, Bob said. A couple days, maybe a little more. I've already done all the hard work of finding you. Do it, Ryan said. Coordinate with Jorge Trujillo, please. Yes, of course, Bob said. When do you need it? Immediately, if not sooner, Ryan said. Okay, I'll look into it, Bob said. Ryan gave him Jorge's number and ended the conversation. He looked at Lisa's phone and saw that the search was finally complete, and all the emails that mentioned the word retreat were on the screen. He started reading them and realized that retreats were nothing more than 3 or 4 day parties filled with alcohol. As he read the letters, a plan began to form in his mind. After reading the letters, he turned off her phone and took out the battery. After smoking the last cigarette, he went into the house, ate the TV dinner he had cooked in the microwave, and went to bed. The next afternoon, he was standing at his makeshift shooting range shooting targets with a .45 caliber pistol when he heard someone behind him. He put the gun away and turned to see Beverly in a t-shirt and short shorts holding a basket. "Well, hello, neighbor," he said, admiring the beautiful sight before him. Beverly looked at least 10 years younger in those shorts. "Greetings," she said. "The target is practicing, I see." "Yeah, I like to work out," he said. "You seem to be pretty good at it, considering you only have one eye," she said. "Mind if I give it a try?" "Not at all," he said, holding out his ear protection to her. She put it on, then loaded the magazine and slid it into the grip. It amazed him that she knew how to handle a gun. She got into position and, holding the gun with both hands, fired 9 rounds into the paper target he had set up. She put the gun away, and they looked at the target. 1 round went high and to the right, but the rest formed an impressive group in the center of the target. "Nice shooting," he said. "Where did you learn that?" "Wallace taught me how to shoot when I was old enough to hold a gun," she said. "Did he keep guns in the house?" asked Ryan. "Of course," she said. "But we had to sell them, all except my old .410 caliber shotgun. I use it to keep the coyotes away from the chickens." "I'm impressed," he said. "I understand you have some guns too," she said. "Yes, 1 or 2, he said. "What's in the basket, if you don't mind my asking?" "Not at all," she said. "I made lasagna and thought we could have dinner tonight, unless you have other plans." "I could use some lasagna," he said. "Let's go to the house. Dinner's coming soon anyway." He took the basket and they walked toward the house. "I really like what you've done with the place," she said. "It doesn't look as bleak as it used to." "Thank you. She's been good to me, so I thought I'd tweak her a bit," he said. He opened the back door and invited her in, checking her feet as she walked ahead of him. As she climbed the stairs to the house, he noticed something. "Wallace is lucky to have a woman like this," he thought to himself. "I see you've remodeled the inside too," she said. "It's very nice, but it looks a bit Spartan," she added, looking at the bare walls. "Well, I didn't see the need to clutter the walls," he said. "Maybe you need to create some new memories here," she said. "Some happy memories." "Maybe," he said wistfully. He set the basket on the kitchen counter, and she began to empty it and set the lasagna dish on the utensil rack that was next to the microwave. He pulled out a couple plates and silverware and set them on the table. Then he picked up a couple glasses. "I hope you don't mind sweet tea," he said. "It's either that or a Coke." "Sweet tea is fine," she said. He put ice in glasses from the refrigerator door and poured each of them a glass of tea. Taking a couple napkins from a drawer, he carried the lasagna to the table. Beverly took the tray it was on and placed it on the table. He took a spatula and portioned out the lasagna. "I hope you like it," she said. "I haven't made anything like this in a long time. I like to use a lot of mushrooms and cheese." "I love lasagna," he said, "especially when it's full of mushrooms and sprinkled with cheese." He took a bite and savored the flavor. "Oh my God, Beverly, this is absolutely the best lasagna I've ever had." She smiled, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Thank you, you're too kind," she said. "Not at all," he said. "I could eat like that every day." "Do you cook like that for Wallace?" "Yes," she said. "I enjoyed cooking for him. I also enjoyed cooking it for you." He looked at her, taking in her features, the soft eyes, the dimples, the blonde hair gathered in a ponytail. "Thank you very much," he said. "This, let me tell you, is better than TV dinners." She chuckled. "I'm glad you like it," she said. "So, how was your day?" he asked. "Well, I went into town and bought some chicken feed," she said. "Good stuff this time. I felt good. For the first time in a long time I felt, I don't know, alive. I can't tell you how long it's been since I've felt this good." "You should have called. I would have helped you," Ryan said. "Those feed sacks must have been heavy." "Nonsense," she said. "I'm a farmer. I've been hauling bags of feed since I was a kid." "I can believe it," he said. They ate and made small talk. Ryan was getting more and more comfortable with this woman, and for the first time in a long time, he felt really good. After they ate, he put the dishes away, rinsing them in the sink and putting them in the dishwasher. Beverly covered the lasagna and put it on the stove, since it was still too warm to put in the refrigerator. He filled their glasses with tea and headed for the porch. "Sorry," he said. "It's an old habit. I generally like to smoke on the porch after a meal." "Wallace and I used to do that too," she said. "Would you mind if I joined you?" "Not at all," he said. They stepped out onto the porch, and Ryan handed her a cigarette, lighting it from the lighter. He took out another and lit it, taking his usual seat. She sat down next to him. "I really like this time of day," he said. "It's not too hot, not too cold." "Me too," she said. "It's been a long time since I've been able to just relax and take it all in." "I understand that," he said. "So tell me, how long were you married?" "I think about 23 years old," she said. "I was 19 and he was 44. We were so in love with each other." "You said you had a son," Ryan said. "Where is he now?" "He's attending the Naval Academy in Annapolis," she said. "Got a congressional appointment. He's a sophomore. Wants to be a Marine pilot." "I bet you're proud of him," Ryan said. "I'm proud," she said. "Very proud. He's the first in our family to go to college, let alone the Naval Academy." "I've seen these Marine pilots in action before," Ryan said. "They know their stuff." "Have you ever served?" she asked. "Army," he said. "Infantry. Served in Iraq and Afghanistan." "Wow," she said. "That's impressive." He shrugged. "Can I ask you a personal question?" "You're welcome," he said. "Are you in a relationship right now? Is there someone special in your life? I mean, besides your daughter and grandson," she said. He shook his head. "No," he said. "I got into a relationship after Lisa and Sarah dumped me." "That was over 10 years ago," she said, shocked. "Well, I'm not exactly an angel," he said. "I've been with a few women, but no longer than a couple hours." "I see," she said. "What about you?" he asked. "No, there was no one in my life either," she said. "To everyone here, I am the widow of Wallace Simons, Eggers." "I'm surprised," he said. "Why do you say that?" she asked. "Well, you're pretty, still relatively young, and if I may say so, know how to wear shorts," he said. She smiled. "You think so?" she said. "Wallace liked it when I wore it. Said it reminded him of those girls from the Lil Abner cartoons." "I can understand that," he said. "Truth be told, I haven't been able to relax and think about anything but bills for the last few years," she said. She rose from her chair and stood in front of him. "You know, it's been almost 6 years since I've been with a man, and I've only been with one man in my entire life. I know we just met, but I feel a connection to you. I hope you don't think I'm being too blunt, but I need this, please." I had to cut a big scene here due to video hosting rules. The full unedited versions of the voiceovers are in our exclusive community on Patreon, and the link is always in the description. After calming down, they stared at each other's faces for a few minutes. They kissed. "Oh my God, that was wonderful," she said. "It was much better," he told her. "Your ex was a stupid fool to cheat on you," she said. "I would never do that to you." He smiled, considering his options. "Yes, I was," he said. "And I would never do that to you." "I know," she said. They spent the next couple hours together. Exhausted, they lay in bed, each absorbed in their own thoughts. "I know you said you gave up on the relationship, but do you think we can at least be partners?" she asked. "Friends with benefits, maybe?" "Maybe I was too hasty in giving up on the relationship," he said. "But yes, we can definitely be partners." "A deal then," she said. "An exclusive partnership?" "Of course," he said. "Exclusive. Who knows what it might lead to?" She smiled and kissed him. She got up from the bed when they broke the kiss. "I need to get home," she said. "I usually get up really early to feed the chickens and collect eggs." "Need help?" he asked. "I get it," she said. Maybe next time you'll spend the night at my place and then you can get up at 5 in the morning with me, he laughed. You think I'm kidding, don't you? She asked. Do you really get up that early? He asked. Yeah, she said. Been doing it since I was a little girl. That's what a farm is, you know. Damn, he said. You're an impressive lady. You know that? I'm glad you think so, cowboy, she said, kissing him. You're impressive yourself. They headed downstairs. You can keep that lasagna. Maybe you can finish it tomorrow or something, she said, as she headed for the door. I'll bring the dish over later. Don't worry. I know where you live, remember? For several minutes, they held each other in an embrace. I never thought I'd feel like this again, he told her. Thank you. You're a wonderful woman, Beverly Simons. And you're a damn good man, Ryan Caldwell, she said. My man. Remember that, partner? He smiled and they kissed each other goodnight. He watched her walk to her car and drive away. He lit a cigarette on the porch, pondering what had just happened. Was Sheriff Coltrane right? Was Beverly the woman he was meant to be with? For the first time in years, he felt content, even happy. He finished his cigarette and went back to bed. The next 2 weeks flew by for Ryan. After that first night with Beverly, he spent every other night at her house, waking up at 5 o'clock. He even helped her with the chickens, and his respect for her grew every day. He realized how hard she was working, and it turned out those feed sacks could be pretty heavy. How she had managed to carry them all these years alone, he wondered. She not only took care of the chickens, but also kept her house clean, cooked food fit for a king, and still had plenty of energy. On top of that, she found that her egg business was starting to pick up again. So she spent most of her day delivering eggs and taking orders. On the nights he stayed home, he still woke up at 5 o'clock, so he'd start the day with a workout and a run. The rest of his time was spent going through years of Lisa's letters, trying to get what he could out of them. He has also been in touch with Jorge, Bob, and Sarah. Bob and Jorge were assured that the location for the night's retreat had already been determined. It looks like it's only a couple hours north of where you are in New Mexico, Jorge said. Seriously? Asked Ryan. Yeah, he said. I'll send you a link to a Google map and you can check it out for yourself. He did, and Ryan printed out a large map of the area to study it closer. Sarah informed him that Lisa had finally been brought out of her medically induced coma. As the doctor had feared, the damage to her brain was quite extensive. She had lost most of her motor control and could barely speak. She was now confined to a wheelchair most of the day and underwent physical therapy. But doctors say it is unlikely she will ever be able to walk more than a few steps at a time. She's also undergoing speech therapy, and they say it's possible she'll be able to communicate fully on her own someday. FBI agents were still watching Bob, Sarah, and his parents, but higher-ups were beginning to think the danger was probably over, and were considering canceling the guards. The legal case against Jake was moving slowly, and as far as he could tell from his contacts at the FBI, the investigations against Knight and Elmer Jenkins were mired in minutiae and legal delays. After a couple weeks, Ryan decided it was time to let Beverly know what was going on, and one night at dinner, he explained the whole situation to her. He even told her about the 9 years he'd spent as a mercenary. She sat in silence as he laid it all out for her. When he finished, she nodded her head and thought for a moment before answering. Here we come to the end of this part, full of drama, intrigue, and humanity. Let me remind you that subscribing guarantees that YouTube will recommend you a new part of this story, and you will never miss it. Ryan appeared before us not only as a former military man, but also as a deeply compassionate person. His willingness to help a stranger in despair speaks of his big heart. Beverly's story is a story of resilience and survival. Despite all the difficulties, she remained optimistic and believed in the best. Her meeting with Ryan became a turning point in her life, opening up new opportunities for her. Their relationship develops rapidly, and we see the birth of a new love. Will they be able to build a happy future together? Or will Ryan's past interfere with their happiness? And what awaits us in the finale? Will Ryan reveal the secret of the Knight Petroleum Corporation? Will he be able to avenge his wife? And what will happen to Beverly? We will find out the answers to these questions in one of the next episodes. Don't miss it. And if you can't wait to find out what happens next, The full version of the story is already available on our Patreon. Subscribe and enjoy the full version of this exciting story.